Been behaving yourself, have you? I'm not going to have you sitting down either. I want some help here. I knew it wouldn't be long before you'd be back again, hey? I bet you're wondering what I've been doing as well. Well, I've been here at the homestead trying to get my head around this whole situation we've got at the minute with the virus. One thing I've always said in my life, and one thing I've always wanted to do in my life, is to become as self-sufficient as possible. Now, I just want to quickly make a note that I haven't released a lot of videos for a very long time, and I'm not going to go into it. I've had a lot of things I've been doing and I just have not had time, but I want to thank everybody who's commented on the videos, I didn't log into the account in so long, so the people that commented on my last video, thank you for that. This whole situation's with nothing in the shops at the moment, and you know, trying to grow things that you're going to need if you can't supply food. Now, I'm not going to be a doomsdayer and say everything's going to go down the pan, even though it probably will. But what I'm trying to do this year is grow things that I can use off the cuff, things that you can go out quickly, cut and eat, and things you can store for the winter. Now, I've never really been one for growing too many potatoes, but this year what I've decided to do is grow a lot of potatoes, things that I can dig up and store for the winter. So this video is really about from a sustainable point of view, self-sufficiency point of view, and today I'm doing a little project whereby I've got some old big industrial pipes and I'm cutting them down and I'm putting a bit of pond liner at the base so that I can really grow more squashes, because I think squashes are a great crop. I've grown some fantastic pumpkins here, so I'm going to trial this year doing them in pots, and I'll be giving updates for that. But really what I want to do is I always try experimenting with things, and I'm sure you're the same, but this year I just want to grow things I can blimmin' eat or stick in the freezer. So I'm just going to be concentrating on that. So don't get disheartened if you've messaged or commented. I'm useless at getting back to people. I don't even speak to my own family that much, but that's another issue. Really investigate the whole subject of self-sufficiency, and can we achieve that in the modern world? Because quite frankly, I look around the world at the moment, I look at globalism and I think we've got a problem. We've got a massive problem. Not only, and what I find so interesting about all of this as well, not only do we have a problem in terms of globalisation, accessing all we need, you know, stuff for health staff and people like that, we've actually got a problem with society. We've got a problem with, you know, wealth distribution, and we've also got mental health crisis in this country and many Western countries, and we also have problems like obesity, and all of these, I believe, are actually linked and can be tackled if we try and re-ruralise and become a little bit more self-sufficient. Call it going back to the Dark Ages if you want. But I think if we get away from high density and trying to live more off of the sun's energy of today, we're going to be better off in the long run. I like technology. I love all of that stuff. But if we can use the energy of today and implement that into giving us the opportunity to investigate self-sufficiency, we could have the best of both worlds. We just have to live life perhaps in a little bit more ecological balance. So don't want to ramble on all day long, but I hope you're all taking care of yourself. I do think this is going to pass. We're going to be okay, but we need to start thinking about the future in a sustainable sense. Let's sort out these big pots I've got going. Right, so here I have some heavy duty industrial conduit pipes. Now these are used in sort of infrastructure projects to for water and for cables, etc. They're about 600 millimeters wide in diameter, and you know, I used one of these on a landscaping project for kids at schools. We do eco schools for children, and I had some left over, and I've decided they're just perfect. They're just going to hold a great volume of soil to perhaps grow some squashes. Here I've got a hedgerow, a south-facing hedgerow, but the only problem is anywhere you've got a hedgerow, the roots are sucking a lot of moisture out of the ground. So my concept here was to try and maximise the top of my vegetable beds by putting some real nutrient dense, high nitrogen sort of soil from the compost heap, which has got a combination of the chickens, the chicken manure and things from the previous year, and put them in here. But what I want to do is use some sort of liner inside just to sort of pull the water a little bit. So I'm going to tape just to the inside and then fill it full of soil, and we're going to see how we get on. Right, so what I've got here is some pond liner. This is the butyl rubber. I know it's not sustainable in that sense, but it was a waste item from a landscaping project. You know, they're quite sizable. Yeah, so that should do nicely. We push that down inside there now. Just try and get that little cupping system around the edges, and we'll tape that to the inside. I've only just emptied this compost heap, and this is the rough and ready stuff that I'll be turning once more. Look at that, we've got a little spur of asparagus coming out of that. I don't know what happened there, must have accidentally dug up a little bit of a crown, but I'm always amazed at just how nutrient rich this stuff is. I mean, the nasturtium leaves, they're like dinner plates, so this stuff will be really good because squashes need a real rich soil. And then I'm going to top the soil off with some of this it's like a 50% compost, 50% topsoil mix. Do you know what? I get so excited doing just simple things like this. Just shoveling a bit of soil. Simple creature, me. Look at that. I'm really excited about that. That is a decent planting area there. And hopefully, you know, now when I water it, especially in summer, all the water's not just going to run out. There's going to be some retention there, and create a nice, warm, moist, perfect, nutritious environment for growing squashes like pumpkins, butternut squash, things like that. This is my mate Boris. Great name, Boris. You know, one thing I found is gardening can keep you really fit, healthy and stress-free. But sometimes, even when gardening isn't enough, you can always go up to Boris and give him a loving slap. Keeps you young. Give it a go. What do you think, Boris? Right, so what I've got you here, and I've got your attention, I'm going to be showing you a few little other things that I'm going to be doing and growing this year to try and be as self-sufficient as possible while the pandemic of COVID-19 is going on. One of the things I've tried to do with my self-sufficient gardening is try to extend the season as much as possible, and a polytunnel or glass house is a great way to do that. You can get your seedlings going on early on in the season, and you can also harvest a little bit later on in the season as well. But at this time of year, and for the project I just undertook there for the squashes that I'm going to be growing this year, it's a great way to get your young squashes going and getting a little bit of strength to them. Because one of the things with squashes, pumpkins, butternut squash, is they need a certain amount of the year to grow, get strong, fruit and then ripen. And in a lot of temperate climates, that's one of your main problems. So even though you can harvest them right up to October, you need to get them going early, you need to get them strong, but at the same time, you don't want the frost to come and annihilate them. So that's something I'm doing here. These squashes I'm going to let them get big in here. By then it will be sort of halfway through May, and I can leave 2 in the pots, and I'm going to put the pots up against the south side of the house, and that way I can keep 2 grow into a pot. These are big pots that, you know, used for commercial landscaping and growing small trees. And the other ones I can go and pop around the garden and the plots where I need them. And one of the most important things you've got to do if you want to try and secure your food supply is distinguish between food as a fuel and food as nutrition. If you just look at food as carbohydrates, energy, you're not going to be getting a lot of the benefit from certain food types. So to give you an example, if you just want to grow potatoes, now don't get me wrong, potatoes are very nutritious, but a lot of the dark green vegetables, leafy vegetables and leafy greens give us a lot of the nutrients we'll need to be healthy. And that's why a lot of the recommendations today are to eat as many vegetables as possible. So, you know, try and be diverse. I try and go for greens that will come, you can cut and come again, and are perennial. And that also ties into permaculture systems, and, you know, really use a different variant of things to grow. So, for instance, the potato famine which happened in Ireland all them years ago, if you're just relying on potatoes and growing mass amounts of it, basically what our whole modern agricultural practice is based upon, you're running the risk of having a disease come and wipe out your crop. So my advice is have your carbohydrate crops, but also things like your leafy vegetables, chards, and also try and embrace wild crops. Wild garlics, try and have wild areas, because I think the one thing we've done wrong is getting too far away from ecological balance. I'm going to show you a few things I'm doing outside with my chicken enclosures. Now, I personally think things like chickens are your best bet, because if you don't necessarily like to slaughter animals, then chickens will give you a good supply of eggs. Chickens are also very, very useful. Their manure is very, very rich in potassium and nitrogen, and it's really good for the vegetable plot, and, you know, recycling nutrients on site. That's a very, very important part of self-sufficiency if you're going to get it right. You know, modern agriculture, what we do is we use oil-based fertilizers from fossil fuels, and we bleach the ground with them, and we don't really protect our soil, protect the organic life of the soil, which soil degradation is a massive problem. It's not talked about enough in today's world. And, you know, unfortunately, people are a little bit blasé to the fact that they just don't know enough about these issues. So one of the things that I've tried to do here is use an aviary system for my chickens, which basically allows them to come and go within their run as they please. And if I'm here during the day, I'll let them roam around, let them pick at the dandelions and things like that. But ultimately, what's great about chickens is that if you've got a decent area for them to peck and, you know, scratch around for food, they'll feed themselves from the environment. They're omnivorous. They'll eat insects, worms, they'll peck at weeds, and they'll produce you really nutritious eggs. So the whole concept with chickens is, I mean, a lot of people will feed them with agricultural feed. If you want to be completely self-sufficient, you'll need one chicken, say, per so many half an acre or something like that. Obviously it'd be a lot more chickens you could maintain in an area, and if you've got an ecologically rich area, you can beef that up. But one good thing with chickens is if you have leftovers or scraps, they will reuse it for you and turn it into eggs. So there's a good reason why if you go to any peasant village in medieval Europe or Southeast Asia or any of these places where you see self-sufficient practices, chickens are very, very useful creatures. Also things like pigeons. If you go to some of the places in Cyprus where my family are from, the peasant villages back then, they would have pigeons, because pigeons are great, because pigeons will fly around, feed themselves from the environment, and then they come back, and then every so often you walk up in a dovecote and you take the odd one, and you have them going around the landscape for you, collecting food, things like that. I mean, no, look, if you live in the centre of London, you might want to do that because you've probably not got very healthy animals. But if you're in a mountain valley in Cyprus or even rural UK, we're 30 miles from the centre of London here. Even though we're surrounded by forest in the Chiltern Hills, it's amazing. You don't have to go far out of town to find beautiful countryside, and I think that's what we've forgotten. We've got so used to living in our little four walls, we've forgotten what the real world is about. Because I tell you, during this lockdown period, I found quite easy, to be honest, because I live in a beautiful place and I'm a bit of an introvert anyway. But a lot of people are struggling with their mental health, and I think one of the best ways to do it is to get outside in nature. And even just sitting here watching the chickens. You know, unfortunately, a lot of these poor kids from London, they don't know the joy that can be extracted from being around nature. And I'm hoping that with this crisis which is happening, perhaps we look less away from nucleated environments and more to nature in the future. Now, usually the way I keep my chickens is I have two enclosures. I have an enclosure for one lot of chickens that are usually younger that I will introduce to a newer bunch of chickens, and I will rotate them every year. And I also have had a time when I've just had ducks in one area. But the minute this whole COVID crisis came and I saw what was going on in the shops, I thought it might be good to get a little bit more carbohydrate into the ground. If you keep poultry or chickens in one environment for too long, pathogens can build up, and disease, and there's always the risk of diseases and things building up in the soil. And what you're left with when you've got chickens and poultry is very, very fertile soil. So I made the decision to move all the chickens and poultry into one enclosure and dig over this nutrient-rich soil, and do drills and put a whole seed potato crop in. And I've mounded up the soil, and as the year progresses and the potatoes grow, I'll keep throwing the soil over there. And we should, from this plot here, have at least we should have at least a couple of full bins full of potatoes for storage during the winter months. So, you know, rotation and recycling nutrients. This is the things we're going to have to do if we're going to want to produce as much healthy food as possible and be more self-sufficient. Now, a lot of people think the idea of eating snails is a little bit extreme, but let me tell you something. These guys, specifically this type of snail, is not in the UK, is not actually native. The Romans brought this from Europe specifically for eating, and it amazes me how much we spend on chemicals to kill these things, when really what you should be doing is eating them. And if you go to the peasant farmers of Crete, I've got a really good book full of village recipes from Crete, and snails are so easy to pick. You think going out and hunting yourself a mountain goat takes quite a lot of energy. Going and foraging a few of these guys is a great way to get a lot of omega-3, some calories, some protein, but at the same time stop your lettuces from getting nibbled at. Okay? You didn't see that one coming, did you, eh? Hey? So if you're thinking about self-sufficiency, we might have to look a little bit different the way we get our proteins. Now, if you look behind me here, what I've got is some leafy green vegetables. This is chard. Now, if you go to any supermarket, I'm always amazed how much this stuff costs in the supermarket. This is a great crop. If you keep chopping out the seeding heads, the flowering heads, this can last up to 3 years. You've got this rigid stem, which can be boiled and steamed like any other vegetable, and you've also got a good spinach crop. This will also last throughout winter. It won't grow very much throughout winter, but you will be able to use it. What I do is I use the old dry black-eyed beans, what they used to do in the village in Cyprus, and this mixed with them. You know, you dry your beans, you can come out and you can chop this, and you can mix it with some olive oil and lemon, and it's delicious. So any crop that will give you more than 1 year, you've got to be thinking like that. Also things like artichoke, cardoons. If we want to be self-sufficient, you've got your typical beds like this, but really you need to look for a more ecological, sustainable way of getting your food. So things like agroforestry, if you Google them subjects, permaculture, this is the way we're going to do it. You know, low energy input, ecological food systems. Of course, the reason that we don't do this already is there's no profit in it, and you need knowledgeable people going around harvesting by hand, and capitalism just doesn't serve that way of getting food. However, as Martin Crawford says from Agroforestry UK, and I love the man, I love his book, he says, look at orangutans, look at apes, look at chimpanzees in their natural environment, our closest relatives. They go around the forest, they have about 200 different types of fruit and vegetable they eat. And how much more healthier would the human race be if we took a leaf out of their book? Food for thought. And in these times where we're basically living on mice food, ground flour, and high energy foods, which are basically making us fat and sitting on our backsides and doing nothing, perhaps we should think about a better way of integrating with our landscape. Just a thought. See, now looking behind me, you just wouldn't believe that we're within 30 miles of a world city, centre of the UK, London. It's absolutely beautiful here. You don't have to come far away from the town to get out into nature and find some very beautiful places. If you look behind me here, we've got a mixture of hills, woodland and large agricultural fields. If we can somehow get to the point where we're producing food on a local level away from very centralised towns relying on very high energy supply chains, we might have a chance as a species of getting through this crisis. Because so far what I seem to be seeing is a situation where everything is so interconnected that we just have no resilience to a problem which is in effect a form of ecological balance. We've gone so far one way, and if we don't manage to pull it back and start living a little bit better, I think we're going to become extinct, or the system that we rely upon at the moment is going to become extinct. It can't be right that the clothes that we all wear are made cheaply in places like China, India, with young kids. It's all very well as having all of these high standards to work by, but that's no good if we're profiting off of young children working in factories and so forth. The system's got to change. We have to acknowledge that inner city life isn't working, in my opinion. You know, the young people of today, you've got these fat cats with their fat guts playing golf every day, and then you've got these young kids, usually from ethnic minorities in London, walking around with knives. There's a big problem here. A lot of these young kids know that they're, even no matter how hard they work now in the Western world, they may not ever own their own home. A lot of people say, well, no, that's not true if you work hard. But if you actually are from them poor areas, or the people I speak to, there's actually very little hope for some of these guys now. They see such a mountain they have to climb if they want to own their own home, and people don't think it has a big part in the psyche of some of these young people. And also, you know, if you put a wild animal like a leopard in a cage or in 4 grey walls, it's going to be a very aggressive animal. I think we need to re-ruralise, get away from centralised environments. I think a lot of this all plays. I think a lot of the problems we have today, obesity, mental health, unsustainability, climate change, it's all interlinked. The first thing we have to do, it's all very well having technology, that's fine, we can do all of that, but what we need to do is find a way of using all of this energy that we've got now, this cheap energy, and setting ourselves up in a way so we have more sustainable communities, and a way of subsidising our housing through it as well. Anyway, just a few thoughts I thought I'd give one. The COVID-19 problem is a big problem because my wife actually commutes every day into central London, and she's an A&E, an emergency medicine doctor, and she works with COVID patients every day. So it might be a matter of time before we get it. I mean, they're very, very robust and good cleaning mechanisms they have there. But the headlines today in the UK are, we are running out of personal protection equipment for our amazing health staff because all of it's made in China. And, you know, that's fine, you know, but we've got to get away from that. We've got to become self-sufficient, okay? Absolutely. So, you know, I just want to give a big shout out to everyone out there that we're all dealing with this at the moment. We will get through it, but I hope and I pray that we all start thinking about where our food comes from, what we wear and what we eat, and what impact it has on other places on the world. It's not right that Amazonian tribes are getting displaced and turned into alcoholics so that we can have cheap produce, okay? In my opinion, that's very, very bad and toxic. Okay, so thank you for watching the video. Stay safe, everyone, and I'll see you next time.